So as you probably know, Anna Delvey, real name Anna Sorokin, is currently serving a long prison sentence for tens of thousands of dollars worth of fraud against many different people, including a number of banks. She's from Russia, but did all this in the United States. So this video is about a formal assessment of whether she's a psychopath. I'm not talking about like the colloquial term psychopath, she's a bit of a psycho. I mean a formal, diagnosed, official psychopath. And the way to find that out is to do the psychopath test. That's how a forensic psychiatrist such as myself would officially diagnose whether somebody's a psychopath. So just to be clear, I'm talking about the Netflix version of the character Anna Delvey because that's the behaviour I am going to examine. And I'm going to spend a minute telling you what a psychopath is. I'm going to spend less than a minute telling you what the psychopath test is. And at the very end, I'm going to tell you my personal thoughts on the Netflix series, a bit of a review. Spoiler alert, obviously. If you didn't figure that out and you've clicked on this video and you haven't seen it and you want to see it, then obviously turn this video off. All of those things, welcome to A Psych for Sore Minds. Okay, so what is a psychopath? I've talked about this at length in different videos in the past, go check them out. A psychopath is somebody who manipulates, who has a complete lack of empathy and who sees everybody as potential prey to take advantage of for some reason for themselves. They're not necessarily violent, although obviously some are violent. So for example, they can succeed in the corporate world, but it's more about deceit, lack of empathy, lack of remorse, and taking advantage of people than it is necessarily about physical aggression. What is the psychopath test? So it was invented by a psychologist called Robert Hare in the 1970s. It's a checklist. So there's 20 items, all of which are features of psychopathy. I'm going to go through them all in this video. You either score a 0, a 1 or a 2. 0 if the item is not relevant to you, 1 if it's partially is, and 2 if it definitely is. So you got a potential score from 0 to 40. In the UK, if you score above 25, you're officially a psychopath. In the States, if you score above 30, you're officially the psychopath. The reason for that disparity is complicated. I'm intrigued to see how many of my intelligent viewers know the answer. If you know, put it in the comment section below. Okay, so before we start, one reason that I think this video will be interesting is because I'm going to give you specific examples of her behaviour from the series itself. So this is not theoretical, this is very specific, hopefully to teach you to start thinking like a forensic psychiatry. The other thing I should say is I'm doing this blind, so I haven't calculated the scores yet. I will add them up at the end. I'll give you my prediction a bit later on in the video. I'm going to take a break and talk about something slightly different but related every 5 items. Right, that's enough preamble. Let's get started. Number 1, Anna Delvey. Was she glib with superficial charm? I think she was, absolutely. That's a 2 for me because she was quite charming. She would do a lot to get attention and she would please people almost immediately. You saw that when she impressed that lawyer, I think his name was Alan Reed, within a few hours of meeting him. She impressed that really rich dude on the yacht so she can command the room and command attention when she wanted to. That's a definite 2. Number 2, grandiose, which is, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Bless me. Grandiose, which is like an exaggerated high estimation of herself. Definitely, because she's always saying that she's better than other people. She says things like, these people are idiots. They're always trying to drag me down. Why am I surrounded by such idiots? Sorry, that's my impression of Anna Delvey, not female Borat. Also, if you remember the reporter Vivian, when she came to see her, Anna kept insisting that she had to have a VIP room and a VIP visit. She likes being the centre of attention. She likes being a celebrity. So that's a definite yes, a 2 for grandiosity. Number 3, a constant need for stimulation. Absolutely, this is a yes as well. So she likes parties. She likes holidays. She would spontaneously go on holidays. She kind of often complained that she was bored and she would get bored very easily. So she'd be in a restaurant and then say, the food sucks here anyway, let's go to a different party. Life is for living, you know. And she would often insult the place that she had just been in and insult people as well. So yeah, constant need for stimulation. Number 4, pathological liar. Absolutely, of course she was a pathological liar. This is one of the strongest traits. She constantly lied. And even though it wasn't that clear at which points some of what she was saying was lying or not, in some other parts of the series it was definitely clear because there were too many versions of events. So To give you a specific example, when she talked about her childhood, she told the psychiatrist that her father was like a violent drunk man. And then she told many separate people that he was really rich and that she was an heiress and that he kept cutting her off, even though it appeared that she didn't have this money. And I think she even implied that her father was a gangster at some point. So that there's too many untruths for it all to be consistent. Number 5, cunning or manipulative. Sorry, so I'll give a 2 for number 4, pathological liar. Number 5, cunning and manipulative. Absolutely. So she manipulated different people. Off the top of my head, there was that sort of rich woman that she stayed with. She convinced her to take money away from her boyfriend so she can put it into the Anna Delvey Foundation. That is a classic textbook indication of a psychopath. So they'll hurt somebody or stab somebody in the back that's close to them just for their own advantage so they can further their own agenda. A normal person wouldn't do that because they'd have empathy, not necessarily for strangers, but certainly for people that are close to them. So textbook psychopathy right there. Okay, before we jump into number 6 of the 20 items, I'm going to very quickly give you my prediction. I predict Anna Delvey is going to be a psychopath. That's hardly groundbreaking. I'm not a genius. She's just very classically a psychopath in most of her interactions and behaviour. So that's not groundbreaking, but I think I'm going to try and predict roughly what score. So I can't see her scoring low on many items. So of a possible score of 40, I'm going to predict somewhere between 33 and 37, if I'm allowed to do that. I'm going to write that down because I might forget. 33 and 37. Let's see how I did. The other thing I wanted to say before we go on to number 6 is that if you're interested in psychopaths, and let's face it, who isn't? I've done a whole series about psychopaths, including doing this very thing for Michael Jordan, who has been accused of being a psychopath in the past. If you want to see how well he fared on the psychopath test, as carried out by moi, then go 𝐘𝐸𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 check that video out. I've also done a video on the difference between psychopaths and sociopaths. I urge you to watch that. I think it's one of my funniest videos. And another video on psychopaths versus narcissists, which is also dope. Okay, let's carry on with the checklist. Number 6, does she have a lack of remorse or guilt? Absolutely. So this was really well reflected when Rachel had spent all that money. Rachel was getting into trouble, was constantly texting Anna, and Anna couldn't care less. She was out on holiday. She was getting these desperate messages and just ignoring them. That's to somebody that's supposed to be like friends with her. Absolute lack of remorse of what she had done. Number 7, this is an interesting one. Shallow affect. So people often misunderstand what this means. That doesn't mean faking. So affect is mood, how you present yourself, happy, sad, frustrated, irritable. A shallow affect isn't what some people assume, which is where you fake or present it in an insincere way. It's actually not deeply feeling emotions. So if somebody's like sensitive, it's the opposite of being sensitive. So it's when you do feel emotions, but psychopaths will feel them in a very shallow way, very changeable. So yes, I think Anna does have this. I would also give this a 2. I think that a good reflection of that was the episode when she was in Marrakesh, because she was like really happy when she got there, taking Instagram selfies and photos, boozing with her friends, and then seen like very easily frustrated and bored and was getting very argumentative, excuse me. So that is the definition of a shallow affect. 2 points for me. Next one, callous and lacking empathy. So, I mean, this is a whole different topic, but I actually think that there's some flaws in the psychopathy checklist, even though it is the most well recognized and respected way of measuring psychopathy, because I think a lot of the factors are too similar and they overlap. And this is an exact example of that. So I think being callous and lacking empathy is very similar to having no remorse or guilt. But anyway, this is also a 2 for me. This is a yes. So for example, she insulted the cleaning staff, calling them basic bitches. These basic bitches just want to hang around me so they can get a tip, you know. And also when the journalist Vivian visited, Anna was just not very complimentary, not very empathetic really towards her being pregnant. Made some sort of slight insults about her appearance. She said something like, people have babies in the field every day. You're not special. Having said all that, she did show some empathy and some affection at times towards some friends. So she's actually quite nice to Neff and had her back. So I think it's difficult to decide whether this is a 1 or 2, but I'm going to go 1. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say she's got a bit of empathy. Number 9, parasitic lifestyle. Absolutely. This is a clear 2. She's the definition of having a parasitic lifestyle. So she's literally living off other people's money, off her own fraud, off bully or pressurizing or tricking her friends into paying for things, not paying them back. Even when she was in financial trouble, she was going to the best hotels because she felt very self-entitled. So again, it's textbook parasitic lifestyle. Number 10, poor behavioural controls. So again, I was criticising this checklist before. This is too similar, in my view, to impulsivity, which comes later. There is a difference. So impulsivity is when you suddenly make a decision without thinking of the consequences and you act upon it without thinking. Whereas poor behavioural control is not necessarily about that suddenness. So it could be you could have put in effort to make the wrong decision, if that makes sense. So poor behavioural controls, absolutely. She was spending too much money frequently. One thing that really stood out for me that showed poor behavioural controls was when they had the intervention and the way she was just like very insulting, and then she walked out, and then she eventually went to rehab, and then in rehab she clearly didn't give a shit about the rules. She was very rude, very disrespectful. She was on a phone. So these are all examples of poor behavioural control. So that is another 2 from me. Before we move on to number 11, I just want to take a quick break to explain to you why a beautiful, intelligent buttercup like you should be listening to a schmuck like me about these kind of topics. That's because I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist, so for a living I assess mentally disordered offenders. I've actually used this test formally to diagnose people and given evidence in criminal cases in courts, so I'm not just getting this stuff off the internet. Unlike some people, Dr. Grande, I'm talking about you, who make these spurious diagnoses. I am the real deal. I work on the front line as an expert witness. On this channel, I do a whole range of videos relating to criminality and to mental illness and the crossover between the two. My favourite videos that I've done recently are the psychology behind stalking, whether autism is being overdiagnosed, and the psychology behind domestic violence. Go chiggity check them out. Okay, back to the list. Number 11, sexually promiscuous. Now, this I think is the first 0 out of 2 on my list. So Anna actually wasn't sexually promiscuous. She only showed her having 1 relationship out of potentially many in the whole series. Especially considering she's quite young and pretty, she could have used that to manipulate other people. She didn't do that, so this is a 0. Early behavioural problems. There's only a limited information about her past in this series, and I would say she did sort of bully other kids, and she made some of them feel a bit small and petty, and she was very judgmental about the way she dressed. But then again, she was also kind of marginalised and alienated, so you could argue that that's a natural response to that. I would mark that a 1. I think there is some behavioural problems there, but not enough for a full-on score. Number 13, lacking realistic long-term goals. Now, this is a difficult one for Anna because she was obviously driven. She obviously had a goal, which is the Anna Delvey Foundation hiring out this really expensive building on Park Avenue, which is unlike what most psychopaths are like. Most psychopaths are they're kind of impulsive, seat of the moment. They don't plan ahead. So she's not that. But at the same time, I would argue that her goals are not really realistic. They might have been in her delusional mind, but compared to the average person, she kind of is entitled and expected to get all this money. Another thing is that she was constantly ripping off hotels to the point that she actually became homeless. So that shows that she's not really planning forward and kind of thinking through the consequences of her actions and planning ahead. So I'm going to give her a 1 out of 2 for this. Number 14, overly impulsive. So I think it's fair to say that Anna Delvey was overly impulsive when she decided to suddenly change hotels, just because sometimes it's because she was getting chased down for her lack of resources, but often she just didn't like this environment. She would just suddenly decide to go off on holiday, etc., etc. So that's a 2 from me. Number 15, irresponsibility. So this is why I don't like this checklist. I don't think it's ideal because it just overlaps with other factors, but irresponsibility, money, obviously she spent money in a very reckless manner. She spent tens of thousands of dollars of other people's money, including her friends' money, even when she didn't have that. Also, I think another good example, very good example actually, of irresponsible behaviour was when she legged it. So she was on bail during a trial, didn't turn up to a court case, flew over to LA, and then actually posted pictures of herself on Instagram, which is how she got caught in the end. My point being, this is not well thought through or responsible behaviour, so that's a good example. I'm going to give her a 2. Okay, before I move on to item 16, I just want to hear from you, dear viewers. I try my best to engage with you. If I don't answer all the comments, I do sincerely apologise. I'm just a very, very busy, very important man. Life is made for living, you know. But I do read them all, so let me know specifically what you thought about this Netflix series. I'm going to tell you my opinions at the end of this episode. What you think of the psychopath test, whether you think it's riddled with fallacies like I do, and also whether you've worked for a psychopath or know a psychopath in real life and what your experience of them has been. Love to read what you have to say. Let me know in the 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵. Okay, let's get back to the test. We're on the home stretch now, last 5. Number 16, failing to accept responsibility for own actions. Again, clear 2, Anna was doing this all the time. She was blaming others. A very good example would be how she was waiting for this money to come through, even though she'd applied for it fraudulently from the banks, and she kept saying it was the bank's fault. These stupid banks, why they're taking so long? Even though she was lying about the process. Short-term marital relationships, no. So this matches up to sexual promiscuity in my view, and Anna didn't have this. History of juvenile delinquency, no. She was not, she had some behavioural problems as I've mentioned, but certainly not this. Number 19, experienced a revocation of conditional release. What that basically is about is that psychopaths don't learn from their mistakes. So if a psychopath has like probation or has some sort of supervision, say from a psychiatrist such as myself, then that doesn't stop or curtail their behaviour. So this is hard to judge with Anna because there isn't that many instances when she had already been in trouble, which is kind of what the series is about. It's about her downfall, but there are a few. So as I mentioned before, she ran when she was on bail, didn't turn up for her trial. Also, this isn't quite fit this category perfectly, but it's kind of a similar parallel example. She was still very money hungry when she was in debt. So what I'm trying to say is she didn't learn her lesson. She didn't lose all this money and then change her behaviour. She just continued. She still felt entitled. And then apparently after she was imprisoned, she violated her visa and then ended up going back to prison. I haven't seen the last episode yet, but that's what I believe happened to her. So I'm going to tenuously give you this a 2 as well. I'm going to give it full marks. And finally, criminal versatility. Now this is a tricky one. So a typical psychopath is a versatile criminal. So they might be aggressive, they might be violent, they might commit fraud, they might shoplift, they might steal, they might embezzle, they might commit sexual offences. Anna didn't do all of these things, but I would argue that she was criminally versatile within the category of fraud. So she's committed lots of different types of fraud, from stealing credit cards like that older woman, to ripping off hotels, to ripping off her friends, to writing dodgy checks for banks, to kind of using this voice codifier to change her voice to vouch for herself, assuming a false identity. So I think I'm going to give her a 1 out of 2 because I think she's versatile within fraud. Okay. Before I top up all my scores and give you my final answer of what Anna Delvey got and whether she is formally a psychopath, I'm going to quickly give you my breakdown of what I thought about this series. Spoiler alert, obviously. I thought it was pretty good. Didn't think it was amazing, but I thought it was pretty good. These are the things I think it did well. It was actually genuinely quite engaging. So just as a kind of quick example, before that, I was watching The Tourist with my wife and it just got a little bit dull with Jamie Dornan, I think is his name. I didn't particularly want to see what happened next, even though that was kind of high octane compared to Anna Delvey. But the characters in Anna Delvey draw you in. You want to know what happens to her. So that was good. The acting I thought was very good by the main character. Sorry, I've forgotten her name, but she was actually good. Not very sure about the accent. My face and my ass. Life is worth for living, you know. However, another thing I think that did quite well was at the beginning, I thought that they were kind of glamorizing Anna and her lifestyle and her whole ethos, because everything was like Sunny Side Up. And I thought it was clever how it turned, the perspective changed over time. That was kind of the whole point, watching her downfall and watching her crumble. So the way you felt about her at the beginning is very different to the way at least I felt about her at the end. So that was clever. I like that. I also thought there were some cool sequences. I think they went over the top, which I will criticise shortly, but there were some very cool kind of dynamic sequences, such as, for example, when she's having flashbacks to her childhood, how Vivian, the reporter, is kind of in the same place and there's the different camera angles. And I have to say the music was actually pretty cool. It's not that often that I watch a series and sort of notice or care about the music, but I didn't know almost any of the tunes, but they just resonated with me. I dug their style. Okay, so the bad things that happen, I'm afraid I'm gonna go medieval on its ass because there were quite a few bad things. I thought that there were some character, not flaws, character flaws are good, character inconsistencies in the film. So a couple of really clear examples. Anna is feisty, she's a bulldog, she speaks her mind. That's what makes her so interesting. That's what made her so successful. There was one scene where she was kind of being forced upstairs by this man who was kind of like a potential banker or investor. And it really didn't ring true to me. She actually got rescued by her friend Neff. That completely is out of keeping of the entire rest of Anna's characters in pretty much every other scene that she's in. So just to be clear, I'm not for a microsecond excusing the behaviour of the man. It was definitely his fault. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it doesn't make sense to me that Anna didn't stand up for herself given what the character, what she's like. It just seemed like a bit of sloppy writing for that bit. There were other smaller inconsistencies as well. So I'll give you another example. One episode, Rachel is kind of really encouraging Casey to reject Anna, to bully her way into the building. And she's like, come on, girl, you're better than this. She's done all this stuff to you. You've got to stand up to her. And the very next episode, Rachel seems to be unable to comprehend that Anna might be ripping her off and is completely standing up for her. And again, it's just sloppy writing. It feels like really disjointed, as if one person wrote one episode and a completely different person or different set of people wrote the second episode. That's how I feel. I also thought at times it was a little bit too smug. It was trying a little bit too hard and it was a little bit insulting towards the viewer. I'll give you some examples. So there was a few times where there were flashbacks that were just really obvious. You didn't need to give me a flashback. So for example, when she's in Marrakesh, there were little bits where Anna was kind of off screen and you could see her having sort of heated conversations with the staff members. And then at the end, it transpired that she hadn't paid for everything and it would zoom back to those meetings as flashbacks like it was some sort of big reveal. But that was really obvious and it kind of frustrated me. When I was watching it at the time, I just thought, well, obviously they're arguing about money. That's the entire point. And also similarly, when she, on an earlier episode, when she was committing credit card fraud, she'd obviously used the credit cards to go and buy things from that older woman who was giving her the credit cards. Again, you didn't have to spoon feed that down the viewer's mouth by showing flashbacks of her actually using the credit card at the end. I thought it's cleverer and more intriguing to let the viewers join the dots. Okay, I've rambled for long enough. I'm actually going to go away and tot these scores up. I have no idea whether my predictions are true. I still think that probably I'm roughly about right, 33 to 37. Let me get back to you in a sec. Okay, the scores are in, and Anna Delvey, the character from the Netflix, according to the formal 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 psychopathy checklist, scored a whopping total of 30. So she's only just technically a psychopath. So I think I was a little bit bold in my predictions, frankly. So yeah, I clearly don't know what I'm talking about. You should stop. You should unsubscribe and stop watching my videos. No, so she didn't score as highly as I thought she would. To be honest, she scored very highly at the beginning. So for the first 7 categories, she got absolute top marks. It was towards the end. So she got 0 for short-term marital relationships, 0 for juvenile delinquency. So I'm not making any excuses. I got it wrong. But at the same time, I think it's a problem in the psychopathy checklist itself, because if you lose something like points on sexual promiscuity where she got 0, you'll lose the same points in short-term marital relationships. There's too much overlap in my view, which can skew the results. But anyway, she still is technically a psychopath. That's the takeaway message. And we all make mistakes. Anyways, that is all I have to say. Hope you enjoyed this video, doing something a bit different from you. Check out the rest of my channel. Stay 𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡, And whatever happens, do not forget the most important thing that I could possibly say to you.
Life is also worth for living, you know.